Whoa, this is intense, Rose said. But it worked. I got them out. Yes, very good, Rose, her mother replied. Now, let's see how well they work. Try striking the tree in front of you. Rose looked up and peered at the tree in front of her, taking a few deep breaths and slowly approaching it, looking back and forth between the tree and the long nails growing from her fingertips, which she was still astounded with, moving them about as she approached. Extending out one of her hands, she first just gave the tree a little poke, pointing out one of her fingers and just jabbing the tree a little bit, trying to see how it felt. At which point, for a second, the nail became embedded in the bark of the tree, Rose having to tug a bit to pull it out. She was surprised at how well that it cut in. They must be exceptionally sharp, she thought to herself. No, Rose, that won't do, her mother replied. Those are weapons. Gentle pokes aren't what they do. You need to actually use them. Strike the tree, Rose. She looked at her mother, a bit disconcerted. Rose had never really attacked anything, and even summoning the nails themselves wasn't done so with the desire to bring harm. She definitely did not know what she was doing, but Rose did her best, taking a deep breath for a moment as she raised one of her hands up, extending her nails outward, and taking a swipe in the direction of the tree. And Rose's hand swung through the air at rapid pace, and it felt like she didn't hit anything at all, but she couldn't be sure, as she had actually closed her eyes as she peeked one eye open to look at how much damage she did to the tree. There wasn't anything wrong with it. She did just swipe at air. She didn't swing close enough to actually hit it. Come now, Rose. You can do better than that. I know this tree is a living thing, but it is just one tree. This forest is filled with countless trees. Bringing harm to just this one will not negatively affect the balance, and you need to know how to use your abilities, how to defend yourself if the time ever comes. Okay, Mom, she said, looking back towards the tree. Okay. One more time, she thought, looking at the tree as she raised her hands, this time not closing her eyes, and getting a bit closer. Once again, Rose whipped her hand through the air, nails extended, and doing her best to keep her eyes open. And this time, there was no question that she struck, as she looked as 5 large gashes got carved into the tree in a downward slashing motion. But it didn't feel as if it slowed Rose's hand down at all. She could see the grooves that were torn into the tree. She knew that she made them, but she didn't feel any tension. She expected it to be somewhat more rough on her, that the nails would slow down as they cut through. But it appeared as if they cut through like butter, as if the tree barely posed any opposition to the force of her nails and their sharpness at all. Good, Rose, that's better. Now try again. You must get used to using them. We can't have you being afraid to strike if it's necessary. That slash is still fairly shallow. You're still frightened of using them. You have to get over that, Rose. So continue, her mother said, looking very seriously at her. Rose took a deep breath once more. Okay, don't be afraid. They're your powers, they're your nails. Use them, Rose thought to herself, as she whipped the other hand across the tree in a horizontal pattern, slashing across the marks that she had already placed in it, this time gouging much deeper into the tree. This time, she actually did feel a small amount of tension. It wasn't much, but she actually felt the impact this time. Looking at the tree, she could see that she tore in at least another inch further. "Yes, that's better, Rose. Keep going," her mother said. And so Rose obliged, and one after another started to slash into the tree. As she did, she started to become accustomed to it, started to understand that she wasn't going to hurt herself by swinging a little harder, pressing her nails in farther, cutting deeper into the tree. Before long, she had slashed into it nearly a dozen times, and it was at that point that Rose noticed that all of her overlapping slashes into the tree had essentially torn a very sizable chunk out of it. It was as if someone had taken a large drill and bored their way through a segment. Still pieces of wood hanging in the open wound, so to speak. Pieces that weren't cut away completely. Rose tried to catch her breath a bit as her heartbeat had accelerated, and she noticed that her breathing had started becoming a bit sporadic. Not intensely, but still more so than normal. Even a few beads of sweat starting to poke out on her face. "Good, Rose. It appears that you're becoming more accustomed with them," her mother said. "Now, it's time for the second test of your abilities. Based on the description given to us by Jax when he performed his scans, you are most likely the type of Okar capable of producing venom, a toxic agent that the Okar use to incapacitate or kill their targets. You must also learn how to control this. Your father was capable of producing a toxin all his own, just as we of the Sky Ray are very individual in the patterns that grow upon our flowers, their size, the number of petals, and the appearance of those petals. So too are the Okar different, depending on the individual. Your toxin specifically could do any number of things. There's really no telling what. But, according to what your father told me, triggering the toxin was primarily done with anger. You must picture something making you angry, and in response to this, your nails will begin to produce the toxin. So, you're going to need to try to visualize something that makes you angry. It was at that point Rose once again tried to close her eyes, trying to find a memory or a movie or anything that would really trigger anger. Angry. Something that makes me angry, she thought, as many memories began to whirl by of instances in which Rose was angry about something. It was then that a very specific memory came to mind, one from when she was just a little girl, and some of the other girls were teasing her, making fun of her red curly hair, calling her a silly carrot. Though the insult itself seemed silly, it was the mockery of all of the other girls that made it bad. All of them taunting her, pointing their fingers and laughing, whirling around her in a circle, just singing, "You're just a carrot, a silly red carrot," over and over again. Rose remembered how angry that it made her. She felt furious, just clenching her fists as all the other girls whirled around her singing that silly little song. It was the most powerful thing that she could think of, and the angriest she could ever remember being. So Rose tried to focus on it, in the same way that she had done with her nails, trying to make it as clear as she could possibly make it. Focus on the anger that she felt at that moment, which did have its effects. Rose's face furrowed up a bit, her nose crinkling, and eyebrows lowering, remembering how angry it made her. She even started to grit her teeth a bit, at which point Rose heard a sound. Drip, 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 like drops of water hitting the ground. As Rose raised her hands, looking at them, she began to see that they were now dripping a strange liquid. It was fluorescent, looking much like water. However, as Rose raised her hands, trying to look a bit closer, this strange watery substance running down them. As small beads of the liquid began to gather on the edge of her nails, she could see that there was also a slight yellow coloration to the liquid. It was mostly clear, yes, but the yellow tint was still there, ever so slightly. Good, Rose. You're getting better at triggering your emotions, her mother said. Now you're capable of summoning your toxin. Unfortunately, we don't know what that toxin's going to do. You might try it on the tree, but it's unlikely to have any effect. The toxins produced by the Okar tend to be only truly effective against complex living organisms. Like animals, their effects can range, but usually it's paralysis. Some even produce psychotropic compounds that cause delirium. There's really no telling what your individual toxin will do until you use it on a living thing, something much more developed than a common tree.